Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Craig Collins.
So I'm feeling a bit down. In fact, I feel a bit like what's going to happen in this industrial revolution. I was disrupted this morning. Anyone who was in the keynote this morning would have heard Sean Cully give an amazing talk on all the technology that's happening, the exponential technologies, and that was about 50% of what I was going to say today. So I've got to fill up 50 minutes. I really was disrupted. So what do you do when something like that happens to you, when you're disrupted, when everything changes? Well, you change your plans, don't you? And that's what I'm going to have to do, is change the plan a bit and change it up. So hopefully this goes off well. I'm talking about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution builds upon the previous revolutions, but it also builds upon the different technologies that are out there. And what characterizes the Fourth Industrial Revolution is effectively a blurring of the lines between physical, digital, and biological spheres. So all the technologies that Sean spoke about this morning, the key to the Fourth Industrial Revolution is that these things are blurring the lines between each other, and they're exponential. So if you look at the picture holistically, or you look at the whole composition of what's happening, we're getting a massive, massive disruption. I want to read a few quotes. So the Fourth Industrial Revolution was coined, or one of the people that coined the phrase is Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum. And to quote him, he said, and this was at Davos 2016, he said, "We stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. The changes are so profound that from the perspective of human history, there's never been a time of greater promise or potential peril." That's Klaus Schwab. So the key difference between this time and any other time in the history is the breakneck pace with which things are happening, and these changes are happening. The pace of change is regarded as exponential, not linear. Now, if you understand exponential, you've heard the story of putting coins onto the chessboard and it gets to the moon and back, the pile of coins, by the time you get to the 64th block. At the moment, I've heard some futurists say that we're on the 32nd block at the moment. It's about to double dramatically. So effectively, we've got these exponential growth technologies. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the technologies, but in case you didn't hear Sean this morning, and in order to just give you some type of insight into some of my thinking around these, I need to just go through each of these. So these are the technologies, or some of the technologies that I see that I'm missing one or two incidental things. But these are the technologies that are currently disrupting industry everywhere we look. Massive, massive disruption and growth at incredible pace. So some of these, and let's recap on some of them. 3D printing. Now, Sean spoke about it this morning, and we've had hobby and home 3D printers for a while, but what's exciting is the industrial 3D printing market. The fact that you can go into a dentist right now, they will take an x-ray of your teeth, they'll identify exactly what the shape of the hole is, they'll go to a 3D printer in the corner and they'll print a filling for you, and half an hour later, they'll put that filling into your mouth, and it was a 3D printed filling fit to purpose. Okay? This is available right now at your average dentist. You can print metal, you can print jewelry. There's a number of technologies that allow you to print almost anything. And where this is really exciting is in supply chain. I was at a mine store in Africa recently, and the obsolescence that they're carrying in spares from equipment that has actually already been decommissioned and removed from the field is just ridiculous. In fact, the money that's spent on obsolescence, or that's sitting there in obsolescent stock, can probably fund an entire bank of 3D printers for these mines, and they could print the parts and components that they require on demand when they need them. So complex supply chains are actually an ideal target for these 3D printers. Effectively, the most complex one of all is the 3D printer in the space station. You can't easily just go and send something to the space station, but they can print tools in the space station at the moment. So this technology is growing at a phenomenal rate. And Sean showed this morning some of the things that they're doing, like building houses and printing cars. I mean, this is real stuff. And it's going to disrupt a $1 trillion manufacturing industry. Let's talk robotics and automation. So we know that robots are faster, they're more precise, they work longer hours, and they don't need time off. A good case study or example of this was one of our customers in East London. So, you know, it's not about big companies doing this. It's about small companies doing this. This company has got 4 production lines that pack millimeal. And as the bags of millimeal come off the production line, they used to have, they run 24 hours a day, they used to have a shift of people, 2 people per line, 4 lines, 8 people per shift, 3 shifts, and they were packing bags onto pallets. 4 robots, 80,000 Rand each. They work 24 hours a day, and there are 32 people that are unemployed. And that was in 2015 in East London. So we're not talking about stuff that's happening overseas, it's happening in Tesla's factories. We're talking about stuff that's happening here, now, on our doorstep. Interesting picture there, crime prevention robots in Silicon Valley. Okay, I mean, that just appealed to me because I could see the South African gangster looking at these robots, and the robot tells him to stop, and he shoots it or something. But the reality is that these robots are patrolling, they're taking photographs, and they're performing crime prevention roles. Picture your security guard at the company who now arrives at 6 o'clock and he sits there for the night. Well, he doesn't need to, and he loses his job when these robots come in play. Let's talk about machine learning. So machine learning and artificial intelligence is a really interesting topic. You know, Sean spoke about the Terminator movies, and these are the things that keep you up at night. You think, well, what happens when machines become more intelligent than we do? Well, it's happening. And while we've been talking about replacement of people because of trucks driving themselves, there's 8.5 million truck drivers that could lose their jobs. Very difficult to repurpose a truck driver as a computer programmer. It's just not going to happen. So those people are going to lose their jobs. But let's talk about the high end. There's robotic or artificial intelligence algorithms now that routinely outperform the best investment bankers. Now, if you're an investment banker in London, you get out of your Bentley and you go into your fancy house in the country, well, you've got to start worrying about your job. And the same with the lawyers. You saw the example of JP Morgan, where they're replacing thousands and thousands of legal hours that would have been billed to them with just computer algorithms. Interesting one year. So I'm a computer programmer, and in my day we didn't have internet and things when I started coding, so you had to code from scratch. Most of the guys now, and the guys that I employ, sit on Google, they know what their task is, they find a pattern or a practice, they adopt that pattern, then they take code snippets, they put it in, and then they make it work. And when they can't get something to work, they go onto Google, they find a piece of code, and they plug it in. And it's really just about assembly of different pieces of code. Well, a DARPA project recently is basically you can give it any task, it goes and takes the software requirement, goes and finds a pattern, it goes and finds pieces of software and pieces of code that will work, it puts it all together, and it writes a program. Okay? So if you're a computer programmer, you might say to your kids, you need to learn to code. Well, computer programs are going to code for you. The scariest one, which I haven't got up there, is the deep learning algorithm that Google has, its artificial intelligence stuff. So one of the things that they do is they allow this algorithm to improve itself by throwing lots of data at it. So it can go and say, well, what does a cat look like? It looks at every single cat video in existence and then understands how cats behave. Well, what they've just done now is they've taught the AI deep learning program how to create a better AI deep learning program. How's that going to escalate? Okay, so one of the other technologies that's growing at this exponential rate is energy storage and energy storage systems. Tesla is a case in point with their solar panel tiles for your roofs, the batteries that they're producing, and in fact the island of Kauai in Hawaii, they've now basically got a solution to power the entire island. And most interesting was April 2017, where the UK got through its first day without burning coal. I was in Frankfurt, I think it was 2015, when they generated enough power from solar to power the entire city. So we can get clean energy from solar, wind, tides, geothermal solutions, and the race is on to build really good storage systems to take away the power problems. Nanotechnology is another one of these exponentially growing technologies, where effectively what we're doing is, like with 3D printing, where you're manufacturing, additive manufacturing, well, what nanotechnology ultimately promises is that you take any matter, you rearrange the molecules and the atoms, and you can make anything else, because whatever you want, if it's a cup of coffee, it's made out of molecules and atoms, and if you rearrange this, you can get what you want. Now, that's the promise. It's a long way off, but they are busy working with the stuff, and they're making incredible stuff. So things like graphene is a material, an advanced material, that was made through the application of nanotechnology to modify the molecular structure of a carbon product. Likewise, carbon nanotubes, which is a very, very strong tube-like structure. Biotechnology is another one of these cases where you're getting, again, it's a crossover of the various technologies, and you're getting incredible development in things like genetic manipulation of microorganisms to develop hormones, antibiotics, etc. And effectively, the research in biotech is focused on these fields: heal the world, fuel the world, and feed the world. I'm going through this quite quickly because this is not the point. So those of you who know me know I'm a technologist. I get very excited about this. I talk about the technology, and I love the technology. That's not the point of today's session, and it's actually a little bit sad what I have to talk about. So quantum computing. Well, quantum computing is here. It's available right now, and while we're still only at the infancy of the technology, it's growing at such a rate that within a few years we'll have what there's a predefined value of 50 qubits, which is the power of the quantum computing. And when we get to that, which they're talking about 2 or 3 years, we will be able to crack any encryption code in existence today with that computer. That's how powerful it is. But fortunately, it will be able to make new uncrackable codes. The quantum computer is going to create a new era of computing. It is going to revolutionize everything we know. So anything that uses a computer today, when you apply quantum computing to it, it takes it to an order of magnitude. Now, take those AI algorithms, the deep learning algorithms, put them into quantum computing, and you can see the path towards general intelligence. Transhumanism, it's a little bit of an offbeat topic, but effectively what's happening is, you get the internet billionaires. Well, they don't want to die, and of course they wouldn't want to die. So what they're doing is investing a huge amount of money and resource into the development of life extension technologies. So apart from things like the wearable embedded enhancements, things like the fact that I wear a watch that monitors my steps and things like that, it's wearable technology. You're also saying that if you can't walk, instead of being in a wheelchair, you could have an exoskeleton that will walk and move your muscles for you. Now, that's fantastic if you are disabled or in that situation. But you can also use it to lift heavy things. So, instead of having a crane that lifts a motor car engine out of a car while you're fixing it, well, put on an exoskeleton and you can lift the engine up. I mean, there's all sorts of really interesting applications for it. But there are other applications in this transhumanism movement, things like TDCS, which effectively means take a current and apply it to the brain while doing certain things, and it speeds up learning and it speeds up reaction times. Now, the US military have been playing with this stuff for the soldiers to learn faster and to move faster. And that's scary stuff, but you're augmenting the human body. So if you take that and extend it, what we're talking about is augmentation of the human through technology. The ultimate augmentation of that is by applying what Elon Musk is looking at the moment, the neuron lace, which effectively gives us an interface to a computer. Now, take quantum computing, artificial intelligence, humanity with neural lace, and you've got this binding together of all these different technologies. It means that instead of pulling out my phone to Google something, I can instantly access all information on the planet. I can process big data, and I can feed that data right back into my brain. There's another use for this, and that use comes in when, and as I'll talk about later, we don't have jobs. Well, we can live and work and play in a virtual world. One other thing on this slide that I want to talk about is the CRISPR genetic editing. So one of the biggest breakthroughs in this transhumanism movement, and in fact in healthcare, has been this CRISPR technology. And what it is it's a bacterial technology that they program it with a predetermined pattern of DNA, then they expose it to your DNA, it goes and hunts down that pattern, and then allows you through another mechanism to edit it. So right now, next month, the 16th of July, is the first scheduled human trial of using CRISPR to fix a genetic problem. And they have a sample group, I think it's 60 women, and they are going to be trying to eliminate the HPV, which is the papillovirus, herpes virus, effectively, using this CRISPR technology. It's on July 16th. That's the first human test. So this stuff's coming at us at a rapid rate. I was chatting to Sean earlier today, and he said that one of the technologies that's really interesting in California at the moment is curing death and rebooting the body. And rebooting the body, they're saying that if I'm 70, I can reset my body and reset my cellular level so that I'm 25 again. Okay? And we're talking about 10, 15 years that stuff will be available. Look, you might have to be a billionaire to afford it, but it will become available. So this brings about the promise of a new world. And effectively, I want to read to you. So we're talking about, by applying all of these technologies, unprecedented productivity and abundance through a supply-side miracle. So effectively, if you can 3D print things and it's incredibly cheap, if you can reduce the costs of everything, reduce the costs of Uber because of driverless cars, you're reducing the cost and demonetizing everything, you're tending to free. But that's still going to take a while before we get there. I think it was 2 SAPEX ago, Kevin Amaro spoke about the creation of abundance through this improvement of productivity, and saying that by 2070 we'd have absolute abundance. Now, I think it's sooner than that because of the exponential nature of the technologies we're talking about. But effectively, what we're talking about is virtually no labor input, virtually no brain power as AI takes over, massive amount of free time, and self-determination, and pretty much everything's available and free. However, and I read to you from my white paper here, it says, work or career can no longer be counted on to fulfill its many crucial roles, from the ordering of our days to the allocation of purchasing power, to the strengthening of the social ties that are nurtured when individuals feel as if they contribute positively to a community. So that's one of the purposes of work, is the fact that we get together as a community here at SAPEX, we start talking, we contribute towards the society, towards the community. The same thing applies in our businesses, in our homes. When you go and join a club, it's about community, it's about human beings interacting with each other. And work is a very important cog that brings people together and allows people to communicate and to have purpose. And what this world is leading to is the removal of work. So workers are unlikely to take this lying down. You know, something has to give. Either society has to find a way to, as I say, shore up work or create additional work artificially, or workers will use the political system to undermine this process. Now, as Sean said this morning, you can't stop progress. You can't change the way it works. So what's going to happen is you're going to have political uncertainty, and you're seeing it in the world today. It's why Trump came into power, because he appealed to the people who are basically bucking against these trends, the non-liberals. So with this promise of the new world comes what I'm really talking about today, and that is, where does it leave people? We're talking about massive unemployment. We're talking about greater inequality. You know, at the moment there's a lot of inequality. South Africa has got massive inequality index, but we're talking about even greater inequality. We're talking about poverty. I was talking about those 8.5 million truck drivers, and where do they go for work? We're talking about hunger, panic, and chaos. When people do not have food, they panic. When you can't feed your children, what do? And we're talking about possible civil uprising and a lack of purpose and a lack of motivation. Okay. Now this is the scary part, and this is the part that sort of makes me maybe not as exuberant about these topics as what I normally am. So, what can we do? You know, most people are in jobs that they don't like. They earn a salary so they can feed their kids, and they may lose those jobs. So we're in a very interesting and challenging time. And the challenge, in my mind, is to rethink the economic model, to ensure that people will find something more interesting to do. So what can we do? Well, I believe we need to change the frame of reference and re-engineer society. Now, I say that very glibly. It's not as easy as what I say. But the point is that we're not going to get rid of unemployment. Unemployment is here to stay, and it's just growing dramatically. So what can we do? We have to change the rules. And I'm saying, for one, let's stop calling it unemployment. Let's call it freedom from work. If you are free from work, you can focus on building your own businesses, building skills and building happiness. You can focus on the creation of content and value. And on this point of creation of content, so I have an 11-year-old son, and he spends half his life gaming, the other half eating, and the other third eating, and another third watching YouTube. And the YouTube content he watches is everything from how to make stuff through to a guy, PewDiePie, who reviews games and has got 55 million followers. That's what I mean by creating content. When you've got 55 million followers and you say, I want you all to buy a Pokemon fidget spinner, then 25 million adults go out and buy fidget spinners for their kids. So we need to focus on creation of content and value. And the best source of productivity or creativity is a person who's free from instructional direction. So I think that there are positives to this. If you don't have to work, well, then you can be free from work and you can do these things. Problem is, how do we get there? So apart from challenging the current economic model, we've got to come up with ways to enable this. And I think what I'm trying to say, it's a given. We're going to have unemployment. So how do we deal with that? And currently, more so than any time in the past, there is a very, very big interest in this concept of universal basic income. And it's a topic that I really believe is the only way that, it's not a case of can we do it, it's a case of it may be the only way that we can get through this. So I'm now going to talk about some of the concepts of basic income. So effectively what we're talking about is a social grant, basically giving people enough money to live above the poverty line. Okay? It's too important for governments. We actually have to find another way, because government is not going to do this. It's not going to happen necessarily through taxation. And I'm not an economist. I don't pretend to know the answers. But these are some of the things that I'm reading and following. And there's a massive momentum around basic income at the moment. And I'll talk to some of that. So effectively, it must be the highest sustainable level that we need to support freedom to do anything that you want. So in other words, you must be able to live, work, eat, educate, and have the basic needs. If those are taken care of with us, then you're free to do whatever you like. That brings about a very, very interesting dynamic in society, because when you're free to do things, you can choose whatever you like, whether that's to be creative, whether it's to lie and watch TV, or whether it is to help people. You can do whatever you like. So there was a study done in Germany, and one of the biggest problems with basic income is that they say it will promote laziness and people will not want to work. I put it in red and I say bingo, okay? Because that's exactly what we want, isn't it? You're not going to have jobs, so why do we want people to work? And everyone who's researched basic income has always said, well, this is the problem. People are not going to work. And I'm saying that that's the solution. Okay, we don't want people to work. We want people to create. We want people to be free from work. And it's interesting because an assessment in Namibia in 2008, they actually did a study on basic income, and they gave a basic income to a little village, and they concluded that economic activity increased, especially through the launch of small businesses, micro businesses. And I believe that is one of the ways that this can be made to work. So let's talk about affordability. Well, when Ivor Blumenthal interviewed me, he said, Craig, you're living in cloud cuckoo land. And I agree with him. Okay, but how can we make this affordable? Governments will not be able to afford this. Well, it's not up to governments. Okay, it's up to society as a whole. But effectively, if you start to look at the costs, if you give people a basic income and they can afford to feed their kids and they can afford to eat healthily, you're going to save money on healthcare, because people are eating healthy. You're going to save money on crime because I'm not going to go and steal something to feed my kids if I'm giving some money to feed my kids. So there's a large amount of money going into current welfare programs and subsidy programs, and there's a lot of fraud and corruption around that as well. If we can replace some of these existing services by giving people the money directly, there are interesting dynamics that happen, and this is being shown by various studies all over the world. This basic income concept is being proven all over the world. Finland is an example, but there's an organization that's currently basically donating a village in Kenya for research to give everyone a basic income. So how can we fund it? Well, most governments are just printing money anyway, and the US government is printing billions of dollars all the time. So why don't we just print the money, give it to the people, and let it flow? When money flows, you create an economic infrastructure that causes people to spend money, and you can cause the money to flow. So it may be a case of not having to shell out this money every single month. It may be having to shell it out for a year and then let the money flow, because people will create micro-businesses. So we need to consider the impact on the local economies of pumping this money into the economies. How do we implement it? Well, firstly, I believe that you have to give it to unemployed. Now, currently we have a grant system in South Africa. It's, I don't know, 380 Rand a month or something like that. You know, we've already got an infrastructure. Okay, the people who are administering it is another story, but we need to extend that grant system. We then need to increase the minimum basic wage to be the same as a UBI. So, in other words, if people want to work, let them work. They're going to get the same type of money, and if they don't want to work, well, as an employer, I don't want people who don't want to work. So I'm happy to pay a minimum wage, and I'm happy for the minimum wage to go up. Business owners need to automate. Okay? We need to reduce jobs because that's the way that we get maximum profitability from our organizations. But we need to acknowledge as well that we have a responsibility to society. So Bill Gates talks about a robotics tax. I'm not sure that's the answer, but I certainly believe that we have, as business owners, we have to understand that we need to contribute more to society, because otherwise we could end up in a Mad Max situation. So we've got to acknowledge this, and we've got to start paying. And I don't want to pay more taxes. Okay, I need to pay this into a different fund, something else that funds it, and start to funneling money from taxes into that fund. So what I want to do is I want to pay for skills, not experience or cheap labor. And I want to strongly promote and reward entrepreneurial efforts. Okay? Give tax breaks, give reduced paperwork, give free business services. The concept is to instantly stimulate the economy, okay, to help offset the cost of the UBI. Now, just a little story. So Liesel's dad lives in Pretoria, and he needed a pants fixed. And he saw there was a guy sitting at the local taxi rank with a sewing machine. So he went down there, took his pants down, and the guy fixed it for him, charged him 30 Rand. Okay? Now, it's an interesting scenario because this guy, he doesn't have work, he's got a sewing machine, and he's applying his trade to the people at the taxi rank. The problem is the people at the taxi rank are paying 13 Rand to go home. They don't have 30 Rand to have something fixed. If you've got a basic income, that guy you can afford to have your pants fixed by that guy, and he's going to build his business up. So these micro businesses may be the solution to the problem of unemployment. Just some figures. Population of South Africa, 54 million. Assuming a grant of, let's say, 1,000 Rand per month per person, the cost is 54 billion a month, or 648 billion a year. The current education budget is 266 billion. And social services is 185 billion. That's this thing gone off. I'll talk louder. I would gladly give up my 1,000 Rand to someone, and I'm sure a lot of other people will, if we can start to look at implementing this, so we can bring that cost down. And I'm not saying get rid of education, but I am saying in the next few slides to change the way we educate as well. It's critical to plan this now. Okay, redistribution needs to be managed properly. The rich or privileged don't want to subsidize the poor. They currently pay taxes, so we need to change that perception. Likewise, people are not content if they essentially feel unnecessary and they're just kept at peace with handouts. So there's that political stigma of being given money to stay quiet and not cause an uprising. So we need to change the culture to one where we don't work because we're free from work, and unemployment is not a bad thing. We need to teach and encourage small businesses rather than jobs. And as I said before, the missing piece in this whole UBI argument is that they all say, well, we need to create jobs. Okay? That's the incorrect assumption. When you make work unnecessary, I believe UBI works. Just some momentum. Guys like Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Diamandis, Elon Musk, Sam Altman, they're all talking about basic income at the moment. If you start doing the reading, go in and type in basic income, you'll find organizations like BEAN, it's the Basic Income Earth Network. They've been punting this since 1986. So the concept comes from, I think it was 200 years ago, someone was proposing this as well. So, you know, the reality is that this concept has been around a long time, but I think we need to start taking it seriously. And I'm saying that because of what you heard this morning, because of the technologies that we're talking about. The exponential technologies, the things that I get excited about, the things that I want to tell people about, those are the things that are causing the massive disruption and that are going to cause people not to have work. And we have to start thinking about alternatives because those technologies are not going away. This is an interesting organization. It's a startup in the US called GiveDirectly.org. And basically, they're aiming to leave government out of this, and they're trying to create an international organization of giving. And what they're doing is they're saying you can support people in extreme poverty by donating $1 per day. Okay. Now, the more people they get onto it, this is the organization that's funding that village in Kenya and using it as a study for basic income. Right. So what else can we do? Well, the next thing that we have to do is we have to talk about the education system. Okay, I put up that what is the purpose of my life. My 11-year-old son asked me on Saturday morning, and took me by surprise. He says, "Dad, what is the purpose of life?" I don't know. I'll just go out there and do some work. But we need to change the education system. So what can schools really teach children who don't need to work? Okay, we can encourage learning, we can encourage reading, we can encourage content consumption and experiences. Okay, life changes when you don't need to work. Okay, you have to teach people to be able to learn because careers will change so fast in the future. Now, this is something that Lindewe said, and the reality is that even this is now, almost superfluous because it's not going to be about careers. It's actually going to be about enjoying life. And I personally think that unschooling is one of the best methods forward, and that could change the dynamics of the amount of money we spend on education. So what is unschooling? Well, let them learn whatever they want. Let them do whatever they want. They're going to learn anyway. My son learns more about the English language by playing online Minecraft with other kids and typing things than he does in his English language class. And he's cottage schooled and homeschooled. So we need to educate a new breed of micro-business owners. Okay? We need to drive entrepreneurship. Now, there's a massive drive at the moment on entrepreneurship. Everywhere if you read Twitter, if you follow these things, from Richard Branson through to our local government, they're doing a great job on encouraging entrepreneurship. This is one of the solutions. We have to encourage entrepreneurship. We have to get people to start businesses. We have to get people to start making their own income because they cannot rely on jobs. We need to teach the use of apps. We need to teach and simplify business practices so that these people can do these things. And one of the most important things is sales skills. We need to teach people how to sell so that you can sell anything you like. Because if you can sell, you can find a way to generate an income for yourself. And then artistic pursuits. Now, I say this sort of a bit tongue-in-cheek because my brother is way more wealthy than I am and he's a South African artist. Art can make money if there's money flowing around, but if there isn't money, then you need to do it for creative sake. So, to conclude, one of the most important skills to teach is how to be happy, because we're going to need to teach that. So I want to just read this from an education point of view. It's the idea that the next Mozart, Einstein, or Edison may be waiting, but because of inequalities like poor schooling, hunger, inadequate housing, etc., they may never reach their full potential. If the technology can provide an equal playing field for those children of the future, provide for all their needs, and that is done through the loss of the low-wage, monotonous, unfulfilled jobs we are clinging to, then I say destroy the jobs. Make way for the new generation and give them the tools they need to create incredible things. And the vehicle to do this is the universal basic income and the changing of the education system. And then one last thing, in conclusion. The fourth industrial revolution will bring about unprecedented change. How we as humanity cope with this change will determine the outcome. As I see it, we have two scenarios, the Mad Max dystopia or the utopia. And if we do not solve poverty and deal with the coming freedom from work, we can expect chaos, civil unrest, breakdown of all society. And the abundance and resources available to society will currently remain in the hands of the elite few. So if we take the actions and start talking about the stuff, thinking about it, we can drive the changes that we need. And that's really my message. I think I've finished 10 minutes early. Are there any questions? Not that I'm qualified to answer them. Yeah. Yeah. I think in essence, it's one of the primary problems that we've got is overpopulation. But there's still plenty of space on the planet. If you think about the amount of space, it's just the proportion of the resources and where they are. But yeah, that may certainly be one of the, my brother argues that that's one of the key things is we have to reduce the number of people. The scary logical conclusion around that is that if you've got AI making decisions and you've got the top 1% who are able to do whatever they like, what's to stop them from reducing population? You know, introducing a virus that just another Ebola that destroys half humanity, then you solve the problem. And these are the types of things that can happen in a situation where you have unrest, where you have political unrest, and you have riots and violence. Well, just destroy that part of the population. And you know, I've heard that said. Yes, Gina.
That leads me to the question about governance and overall governance and how we think about it, because there has to be some sort of way to govern that free state.
If I say what I want to, I may not be able to go back to or go to the States next month. Who's listening? You know, is there an effect? Can anyone name an effective government? Can anyone tell me which government currently is really effective, doing a great job? Everywhere from the States to Brazil to South Africa to the UK. I mean, yes, yeah, valid. I don't speak with authority on it, but possibly, yeah. And they're probably investigating, well, I know Finland is, but they're probably investigating a basic income too. The reality is that governments have to change, and in fact the way that we govern has to change. And possibly one of the problems with government is are there any politicians here? Okay, I just don't want to offend people, but the reality is that, you know, who goes into politics and why do you go into politics? And yes, you can be an activist, you're not necessarily in politics, but I don't know any really, really bright politicians. I know there are some. No, I'm wrong there. But the reality is, okay, that you can create an opportunity and you can make bigger change by not being a politician. Okay, I've got a friend who's in the ACDP and Grant Haskin here in Cape Town, and you know, I don't know why he's a politician. I question it. Why would you want to be a politician? So the people who become politicians are not necessarily the best people to be making the decisions that we need to be made and need to have made. So yes, government is a problem, and personally, I think that privatization of government is actually the way to go.
Another comment, you know, one of the richest countries in the world, and not the richest, is Qatar.
Yes.
If you look at Qatar, you know, purely by the fact that you're a born Qatarian, you already get it. I think it's $1 million. It's supposed to be into your bank.
Yeah. Yeah.
And have you ever seen a Qatarian work?
No. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is why I think that the answer is to satisfy the basic needs. If you can satisfy the basic needs, then people can do what is really valuable, and people will come up with amazing things to do. You know, if think about it, I sat having a drink with a guy who's a plumber, and Currently, he works as a plumber because he has to feed his family. But he's got some really, really clever ideas about how to solve the water problem in Cape Town. And he's created this valve, which is a return valve on the hot water system that basically says, when I switch on the taps, I wait for it to get hot in the mornings. And I'm wasting a lot of water. Well, just turn or put that water back into your system, and when it gets hot, then switch the valve off and let it flow. Okay? Now, it's such a simple solution. He's a plumber. He can't afford the basic venture capital to get something like that started, and no one wants to listen to him. So when your basic needs are taken care of, you can come up with some really interesting solutions. And that's an example, just a simple example. Yes.
What about the competitive territorial aspect? You read the naked ape.
Yes.
And those people, and this is quite utopian in many ways.
Can you compete against an artificial intelligence that can crunch the data that you can't even think about in seconds? Can you compete with a robot that doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, doesn't need time off? Okay. Sure. Well, yeah, no, agreed. I think they talk about esports at the moment, and computer gaming is becoming a massive place. Here's another example of the future. Okay, so you put on your VR environment, you put on your neural network, and you're in a virtual world. You can recreate anything in your virtual world. It's the Matrix. Whatever you want, you can create artificially those scenarios. You can put competitive situations in place, you can put money up for grabs, you can have entertainment and people watching it, and it's all artificially generated because we're not needed to do the actual work. And already Second Life, Sky Wars, there's games out there that support us already. My son's playing Minecraft and he's building the most incredible stuff in Minecraft. He doesn't want to go outside and play, he's playing inside, he's playing on his computer. And our world has changed. And when artificial intelligence is at that level, we have a neural net on, and we totally interface with the computer. Well, you can create any artificial requirement you need. Correct. When you don't have to do something, when you're not given instruction, you can be creative. And I think that that's where our true skill is in our creativity. And how do we encourage that? Thank you. Yes. Correct. Yes.
Part of the discussion could be, well, is that part of the human race? Because once you sustain us, it's not our decision to sustain ourselves anymore. We're reliant on
Agreed.
we can think faster, learn faster, do faster, whatever.
Agreed.
If they decide, well, actually, you're a waste, you're not efficient.
Yeah, but that is the most likely scenario. That is the most likely scenario. And think about it. So we've created our successor, okay? We've evolved. We've evolved into computers. As long as we take our minds, we download it into the computer, we become one with the computer using a neural lace, we've evolved. It's the only way that the human race can actually survive and perpetuate is by actually becoming one with the computer, with the artificial intelligence. And at the end of the day, all it's going to get from us is our creativity. Okay, so yes, and I'm sorry to paint this picture, but this is what keeps me up at night. Okay, we are creating our successors. It is an evolution of the human race. We don't know how fast it's going to happen, but this exponential technology is exponential. The word exponential explains it all. We're talking about 10, 15, 20 years. Okay, my son will be the last generation to learn to drive. Think about that for a moment. So, yeah, I don't know what the answer is. All I want is us to start thinking about it. Okay, start thinking about basic income. Start thinking about these things. Think about education, because we're going to need to start thinking about it.